Hello, I'm Ron Miscavige, and this is Life After Scientology. And I have a special guest on with me today. Her name is Laurie Hodgson. And just as a little point I want to make, when my book came out in May of 2016, just prior to that, May 6th, 2016, there was a show on 2020 that I spoke on. I was interviewed. Laurie Hodgson was on that same show. And she hadn't written a book in those days, but since then, she decided she's going to write a book and expose the church for the abuses that it does, and especially disconnecting your children from their parents. And the name of that book, let me get it out because you should go ahead and buy this today. It's called A Mother's Heartbreak: How Scientology Destroyed My Family. You can go on Amazon, and the book will be released on the 8th of May, but you can pre-order it. So as soon as it comes out, they're going to send a copy out to you. Now, let me give you the title again. A Mother's Heartbreak: How Scientology Destroyed My Family. And that's on Amazon. So welcome to the show, Laurie.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you for the opportunity to be on your show.
Yeah, well, I'm pleased. And I really want you to get your story out because I know we were both interviewed on different mainline shows. And as an example, I think I was interviewed on 2020 for something like 8 hours. If I got maybe 20 minutes of airtime, that was about it. I never got to tell my whole story. So that's what I want you to do today. I want you to give your story in detail and explain how exactly you got in a position where Scientology could do this to you. Because, you know, we both have to take responsibility for that. I lost my two daughters, their children, which is my grandchildren, and all of their children's children, which is my great-grandchildren. I still have communication with my son, Ronnie, and my granddaughter, Jenna, and her family. But let's start off with, first of all, how did you get in Scientology? Why don't you just give us a story on that? How did it happen?
I was 13 years old, and my first stepfather introduced my mom and I. So I went down and I took a personality test, started the communication course, and then in a couple years, I signed a 5-year contract for part-time staff, and I fulfilled that. And during that time, I was recruited for the Sea Org, but I did not join, thankfully. And I also was hit with choosing to handle my dad or disconnect from my dad at 14. And because my dad was critical of Scientology, my real father, he brought in a Time magazine article. And I had to, I showed my stepfather and he said, "You can't read that. You have to bring that in to the church and show them." And that's when they said, "Your dad, you need to stop having him be critical of Scientology or you will not be able to talk to him." And I'm like, "No way, I'm going to talk to my dad." So I did Good Roads, Good Weather, which is getting the person who's critical of Scientology to stop being critical by getting them to see that you don't want them to be talking negative about Scientology. And I was able to do that with my father and keep the relationship. But looking back, I was really close with my dad. I wouldn't have disconnected. So my road in Scientology might have been a lot shorter than over 35 years if I would have had that happen back then. But
yeah, what city was that in? Where did this happen?
I was in San Jose, California.
I got it.
I was at the Stevens Creek Mission in San Jose.
I've been there.
It was a mission, and Kingsley Wimbush was the mission holder at that time. I was there in 1982 when all that went down with the mission holders. I saw that, and seeing all that is kind of why I wanted to leave staff. I didn't like what was going on, and so I fulfilled my contract and then went away to college to get my higher education. I got my bachelor's degree in nutrition and physical education.
Wow. Oh, wait, were you there when the Sea Org came up and they had their terrorist activities launched upon the mission holders?
Yes, I was there. Yep. And that's when I was recruited for the Sea Org also. And they scared me. I was just like, I don't know how I avoided that situation, but thankfully I did. But yeah,
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 who
I
the
was
hell
there
would
during that
wanna who the
time.
hell would wanna join a bunch of hoodlums? Because that's how they acted with the mission holders, didn't they?
Yeah, it was awful. And I was on staff during that time, and it was just, it was a nightmare. So I wanted to leave, but I fulfilled my contract, thank goodness. And, I got away from Scientology for a while. I was up at Chico State going to school. And my best friend at that time, Mari, introduced me to my first husband, who was a Scientologist. His name was Jim Leake. And we got married and had 2 children and lived in San Jose and raised our kids. They weren't active, they went to a Scientology school, but they weren't active when I was married to Jim taking classes. I did a lot of things with my kids. I brought them up to Clear Lake. We would go water skiing, snowboarding. I was kind of known to be, it was called middle class in Scientology, which wasn't a good word.
I know, and they said that you could be PTS to the middle class if you wanted to have the nice things in life. They wanted you to take all of the money that you had, remortgage your house, and give them the money.
Yes, correct. And
You know,
I just wanted to have time with my kids. My kids were my priority. I had a lot of fun with them. Jeremy did baseball, Jessica did soccer, and Scientology was not my priority. So I wasn't a quote true believer. I did do courses and some counseling, but my ex-husband really was. And what happened when I worked at a Scientology school, to go back a little bit, and I saw a staff member crying, and I said, "What's wrong?" She goes, "I can't talk about it." And she said, "Well, why?" I said, "Why not?" And she said, "Well, her daughter is joining the Sea organization," and she was 15.
wow.
And I said, "Well, just say no." I didn't know that you can't say no. I was just, my kids were little. I went home that day to my husband at that time and just said, "I never want our kids to join the Sea Org. I want them to have an education and go to college, and then they can make a decision in life, something as important as that." And he was not on the same terms as me. So
Wow.
that's when I knew, we're going to have trouble. And
So did your first husband, did he do the OT levels, as they say?
no, either one of us. He was clear. I was not. I never got to the state of clear.
Okay.
But we got divorced because I just, he wanted to spend all our money in Scientology, and he wanted to mortgage our house, and I just didn't want to do that. I wanted to have a good life for my kids, and I was fine with Scientology. We just weren't a really good match. So we got divorced, and my kids were still in the Scientology school, and I took them out and put them in public school, and they were doing well. And then this is when my whole nightmare started. Was Jessica was 15, and she was getting great grades, straight A's and B's, and she wanted to be a veterinarian possibly and go to college, and really happy with school, liked her public school. Well, Jim had her that weekend, and he took her to an event, and after a couple hours, she was totally, mind manipulated to hate her school, to want to drop out of school and get her GED. And she tells me this the next day, that, "Mom, I need to join staff," not the Sea Org. She wanted to join staff, sign a 5-year contract, get her GED. This is her purpose in life. And I'm like, what happened to that girl yesterday? I mean, how fast that can change.
Oh,
A
yeah.
couple hours. And I was shocked. I was like, "You're not going to do that." So I fought it for 6 months. During that time, Scientology and her father turned her against me. She started getting really bad grades. We were very close, mother and daughter. We weren't at all then. She was angry with me that I wouldn't let her join. Finally, I agreed for her to go to a Scientology school, and little did I know they graduated her in 3 months. So I thought I had a couple of years, and so she joined staff, 5-year contract. And I said, "If you leave, it's your debt. You're going to have a debt. You're going to owe for your courses." "Oh, I'll never leave, Mom. I'll never leave." And I go, "Okay." After 3 months, Ron, she comes back. She routes off staff, and she has a $13,000 debt after 3 months.
Jesus Christ.
So I get her straightened out, get her back in college. She gets her preschool degree, her certificate. and she's a preschool teacher. And my son's watching all this. He's 12, and he said, "I'll never do that, Mom. I'll never do that." He was happy, doing great. 3 years go by, now he's 15, but it's worse. I just got home from a botched knee replacement. They put the wrong size in. We didn't know it, and I was recovering. I was doing really bad, probably at the worst, really down, in a lot of pain on Percocet. And it was a Sunday morning. Jeremy comes in. He was at his father's. And it's something interesting because Friday night before he came on Sunday, I felt something was wrong. I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
But I felt it. He comes in, "Mom, I want to talk to you." And I look at him, I go, "Yeah." And I was just really in I couldn't even walk. I mean, my knee replacement was too big. So he goes, "I want to join the Sea Org." And I was like,
Jesus
"What?"
Christ.
So got my daughter straightened out. Now my son is begging me to join the Sea Org. And I am in so much pain. I'm on an ice machine. I can't walk. My husband comes in and sees this and says, "You need to leave. Your mom said no. And she's not doing very good right now." I was crying. I'm just like, "You're not going to do that until you're 18. You're going to stay in school." And he came back again that evening and just kept, he was handled by the Sea Org recruiters and his father to handle me to say, yes, he could leave in a couple days. My 15-year-old son.
Wow.
And that didn't go well. I ended up getting a lot of harassment from Sea Org recruiters when I was home trying to recover from my surgery. They were pounding on my door. And at that time, I was in good standing with Scientology, so I couldn't tell my family. You're supposed to keep it in between the church. So I wrote up many reports. No one would help me. My counselor, my auditor counselor would come over and give me a cis. And I'm like, that's not the problem. The problem is I can't recover. Recruiters are trying to take my son, and I'm saying no. I have the legal rights till he's 18. So I had to get a doctor's notice. My best friend, Mari, went and got me a doctor's notice to get the recruiters to back off. I ended up having no sleep, had pneumonia, and an ovarian cyst rupture, which women die from. Wow. I was okay. I got to the hospital in time. I was in the hospital another week recovering from that. They backed off. Then after the 3 months was up, they recruited him again. He changed his mind, didn't want to go, and then he wanted to join. And I knew, Ron, if I didn't say yes after all this pressure, I would lose him to disconnection back then.
Exactly.
So I said, sure. I didn't say sure. I say, I guess you're going to have to go. So I had to sign the consent. I was not doing well, getting ready to go in for another surgery to take the big knee replacement out.
Yeah, and put the correct size in. By the way, that's unbelievable that the medical profession could make a mistake like that. That's unreal to me.
So yes, I know. And I was getting ready to do my second surgery, and he comes in, he goes, "Mom, I changed my mind. I do want to join the Sea Org." I said no for about a couple of days, and he would go outside and get on the phone and come back in. "But Mom, don't you want me to be happy? I'm doing this for you. I need to save the planet." And I'm like, "No, you're going to stay in school." I just got broken down. I just thought, I got to do this surgery in a couple of weeks. You can go, but I want your education. I want you to call me. They promised him the world. That he could go golfing all the time. And his guardian in the Sea Org was Bob Wright. Bob Wright worked right under David Miscavige, he was the international landlord.
Right.
For the Ideal Orgs. And that was his guardian. So I thought, well, his uncle's his guardian. He'll make sure he has his schooling and get his driver's test. And he was going to come home for his 16th birthday. It was all lies. He got 5 days of schooling in 7 months. I got to talk to him only 5 times. He wanted to route out, and he cried many nights. And he finally called me and said, "I'm coming home." I said, "Great." It was Thanksgiving. And I called him all day. I was just like trying to get through. They wouldn't answer. Well, he was having to stay off the base for 2 weeks with a security.
I missed what you just said.
He had to stay off the base at Florida. He was in Florida in the Sea Org. And because he wanted to leave, they put him in a separate place for 2 weeks with a security guard. And I didn't know what was going on, all that he couldn't, get okay to leave. During that time, Ron, they probably did security checking. I found out 6 months later, after he left the Sea Org, that they threatened him with a $3 million gag contract.
Wow.
To not discuss what he saw in the Sea Org. It must be something big.
These people are criminals. They're not just misguided children or something. But it goes on. Let's face it. And as far as recruiting people, they will tell you anything, and they consider it to be the greatest good for the greatest number of dynamics. In other words, that being, get them in and get them signed up, because now you have another slave who's going to work morning till night for peanuts per hour, and it's all justified. I'm going to do a program one of these weeks, not in the near future, but somewhere down the line, about this whole methodology of justified thought. So if you haven't subscribed, I suggest that you do, and just stay tuned so you can catch that show when I do it. But anyway, getting back to this. Yes, they will tell you anything to get you to sign on that dotted line. And then to try to get out, it's a one-way street. It's easy to go in, but you have a hell of a time getting out. When I was in, there was a guy who routed out. In other words, they consider routing out the proper thing to do. It took him 4 years to route out.
Wow.
Let's get back to your story, Laurie. He was locked up getting sec checked. I know the whole rigmarole. All right.
That's awful, Ron. That's just awful.
Yeah.
I was fortunate. My daughter was only in a month, and then my son was in only 7 months, and he was able to route out, but he had that $3 million gag contract over his head, and he never told me. He slipped. It was after he left. It was July 4th, my mom's birthday, and he said, she said, what happened in the Sea Org? He goes, I can't talk about it, Grandma, because I signed a $3 million gag contract, and my mom and I were already unhappy with what happened with the recruiting during my surgeries. That was the straw that broke the camel's back for both of us. When we heard they made my son sign that, I was done, Ron. I'm just like, so a couple months, it was August 30th, 2010, and my mom and I resigned from the Church of Scientology. We wrote our letter into the church, had my kids come in, and I said, we're resigning. You can do Scientology, because I knew I couldn't say they couldn't.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I just want to be your mom. I just don't want to do it. And my daughter was just like, well, what about Dad? And I'm not going to disconnect from you, Mom. So I have to disconnect from my dad. I go, wait a minute. You don't have to disconnect from anyone.
No.
I just don't want to do Scientology. I haven't spoken out, nothing, right?
Yeah.
And my son, he was understanding, more understanding. And I said, just think about it for a week, you guys, before you tell your dad. Just think about what I've said. I spent a 3-hour conversation with them. They told their father. And my friend Mari was friends with Jim Leake, their father. He told her that if my kids do not disconnect from their mom, then I will disconnect from my kids, because no one's going to take my eternity away from him. So I'm like, what? So there it started. 1 week after I resigned with the disconnections, slowly. I got devastated. My kids were my world, my everything. I mean, like I told you, they were number one in my life. And I saw them pulling away. I went and saw Marty Rathbun in 2010. It was a December. I went to him because I thought, who wouldn't be better to go see him to get advice on how to get my kids back?
Yeah.
Right? So I went, and he said, you just have to keep trying to talk to them. Continue to go visit them. Try to talk to them. Don't lose that connection of trying. And so I went back. The next day, I got back from seeing Marty. I was at work. I got an anonymous phone call in the morning asking my business hours. When I got off work, John Allender, he's OT8, I think OT7 at that time. I know him from the past, but I never liked him. He's actually scared me. He came, walking up towards me and was saying, do you enjoy beatings? He was like threatening me. Do you enjoy beatings? I was like, my heart was racing. Then he said, have you been squirreling over the weekend? Squirreling means practicing Scientology outside of Scientology. So they knew my whereabouts. That was from San Jose to Corpus Christi, Texas. They found out my whereabouts. And now he's threatening me with, do you enjoy beatings? I didn't know what he meant, Ron, but I wasn't going to stick around. So I had a knee replacement that got fixed, but I was trying to run into the office. I told my mom. I was just as white as a ghost. I was like, what's going on? That's my first, it's called fair game.
Yeah.
When you speak out, they're going to go after you to shut you up. Scientology is going to shut you up, right? So by scaring me and threatening me because I went and saw Marty, maybe that was why they thought they would shut me up. I called Marty right after that. First, I called the police, made a police report, and then I called Marty, and he said, you know, why don't you share your story? I wasn't going to share my story. I wasn't going to speak out. I just wanted my kids. But after that, Ron, I had to share my story.
Yeah.
And so I shared it on Marty Rathbun's blog, the whole thing that happened with the hospital, the recruiting, the $3 million gag contract. So then the FBI, I started working with the FBI when they were doing the human trafficking about Scientology, because my son was basically there during that time. The FBI came down to interview me and tried to interview my son, but he wasn't at work. So they must have found out and had him. She couldn't believe she couldn't find him. And I said, I know things happen with my situation.
Yeah.
And so I went back to see Marty. And I told my, go ahead.
Hang on. Now, at this point, Laurie, your kids are out of the Sea Org and they have regular jobs in the real world. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they were only in the Sea Org for 7 months for Jeremy and 1 month for Jessica. So they're public Scientologists now.
All right.
Regular jobs. Yes.
Okay.
So I go back to see Marty because I really see they've officially disconnected, and I couldn't deal with it. Sorry, I don't want to start crying, but I couldn't deal with the disconnection. So I called Marty. I went back to see him, and I was also during that time taking my ex-husband to court because he didn't pay his past child services and his past child support. And he also broke the custody agreement because I was supposed to have Jeremy 60% of the time.
Yeah.
He took him from me full time. So he broke the agreement. So I was taking him to court. That's a long story, but that court case got stalled till he was 18 years old. But I did get my past child support.
I got it.
But I wanted to talk in the court about disconnection and how they break up families. That's what I wanted. I wanted no one to go through what I'm going through.
Exactly. I understand totally. I mean, it's terrible.
So when I'm visiting Marty, guess who shows up? I was the first one that brought the Squirrel Busters. And those are those goons that dressed in the blue shirts with cameras on their head. I just got out of an auditing session with Marty, and it was lunch. And earlier in the morning, he said the plumber's going to come by, and he makes a loud noise. And I'm like, okay. I didn't think anything of it. So I'm down having lunch. It was a 2-story. And I hear this obnoxious pounding on the door. I'm like, wow, he was right about that plumber. So I go around the corner, and it's 4 guys dressed in these shirts. And one of them is John Allender at the top of the stairs asking Marty to see my folder. And he said, and I was like, oh my God, it's him again. The one who threatened me 3 months earlier in the parking lot with, do you enjoy beatings, is there. And he's my ex's friend, and he's partly responsible for getting my kids to disconnect from me. So I'm like, my heart was racing. I called my FBI agent because she said, anything happens, call me. She answered right away. And she said, you know what to do. Call the police and get a report right now. So it gets worse. At the bottom of the stairs is Mark Warlick. He's part of the Squirrel Busters. And he had a camera too. He was the DSA, which is called the Director of Special Affairs in Los Gatos, who I wrote up many reports to stop recruiting my son.
Wow.
So we got John Allender at the top of the stairs, Mark Warlick. So they followed me across state lines and scared me and harassed me. So Marty said, go back in the house and lock your doors. And I said, do you want me to call the police? He said, I will. So the police came. And anyway, we did a police report. That's a long story. And the next biggest thing that happened, I was there for 2 weeks, and the Squirrel Busters hung out and tried to, intimidate me. And They actually, this is important. I was out on the boat with Marty. We were rowing in his rowboat, and they were taking pictures of us, and they put things on the internet about my private things in my Scientology counseling.
Wow.
I was born with a smaller leg, and they made fun of that. And they also put my breast enhancement and made fun of that on for everyone to see. So now I can talk about it. But, that's wrong, and it's sexual libel. And I have documented that. And Tony Ortega wrote a report that, yes, they did have that website, and we have verification of it. So, things were just getting crazier and crazier with my story.
Yeah, well, before you go on now, to our viewers,
Yeah.
the worst thing about this program right now? I'll tell you what's worse than anything. Laurie's telling the truth. This is how these people are. These people are lunatics, and they are under the cover of a tax-exempt church where the donations they get are tax-free. Yet they carry on like this, like a bunch of goddamn thugs. This is the Church of Scientology. So continue, Laurie. I just wanted to make that comment to set this straight, that this isn't some story that this girl made up. She actually went through this, and there are many other stories like this. And it's my duty, as far as I'm concerned, to give people like Laurie a chance to speak out. So go ahead, Laurie, continue.
Thank you, Ron. I appreciate it. And being interviewed by you is such a privilege. It's such an honor. I just really thank you for that. I can't believe, when I was a little girl, I never dreamed I'd be talking to Ron Miscavige about what happened with my nightmare with my kids and your nightmare with your kids. I mean, we have that common thing, and we just have to keep speaking out, Ron, and fighting for our kids and families. It's not just you and I. There's thousands of broken families, and that's why my heart's in this, to fight and get them to knock off the abuses and give our families back.
Yep.
So,
so now,
what was that?
Marty's going.
The next thing that happened that was pretty bad, I'm just going to hit a couple more points, and then, people can read my book, because I have it a lot more. That's why I wrote a book. It's so long, but I'm trying to summarize it.
Just to remind people again, okay? Laurie's book is called A Mother's Heartbreak: How Scientology Destroyed My Family. It's available on Amazon. The release date is the 8th of May, which is a couple days from now, but go on today, pre-order it, so as soon as it comes out, it'll be sent out to you. Okay, continue on, Laurie.
And here's my book right here. This is what it looks like. I'm real happy with it. I just got it a couple days ago.
Beautiful cover.
And then on the back, I have a picture of the kids and I. That's my media profile picture. I don't know if you can see it. It's pretty small, but yeah, I'm really pleased with it. I self-published, so it was a lot of work, and I spent 5 years working on that book, and I pulled it for a year and a half. I'll get into why, and then I just decided to finish it up a couple months ago.
That's great.
So the next big thing was my kids are disconnected. I took Marty's advice. I kept sending them presents, trying to reach them, try to talk to them. During this time, I was followed a lot by Scientology operatives, because they don't want me near my kids. I really think, Ron, it's because of what my son knows, that $3 million gag contract. I think it's something big. He worked closely with, his uncle, who worked under David Miscavige. He knows something big. Yeah. And I don't really care what it is. I just want to be his mom. I tell the world that. That's all I want. And I'm at dinner with my husband. I haven't talked about this on the air yet, because I usually just start crying. I'm going to be able to do it this time because I had ABC News, Lisa Bartley interviewed me right during it, after this happened, and I just broke down. We couldn't air it. So I'm ready to talk about it. So I was at dinner with my husband, and I saw a Facebook post that my cousin posted, that her cousin was in the ER, had a really bad motorcycle accident at the track. He missed a double, triple, fell, really, really serious. And I was like, I knew it was my son. I'm just like, she didn't say the name. I immediately knew. So I called the hospitals. I found out what hospital he was in. My ex-husband, Scientology, my daughter, no one told me. Wow. I find out my son is in the ER through a Facebook message, which is, it's just heartbreaking as a mom. So I get my parents, my real dad and stepmom, we go to the hospital, and I said, is Jeremy Leake here? He's 18 now.
Yeah.
And they said, yes. I said, is he okay? We can't give you that information. I'm like, what? I'm his mom. Is my son okay?
Yeah.
They wouldn't budge. When they're 18, he was probably scared to death and ordered not to talk to me. So they wouldn't I couldn't get any information. I snuck around the back. I found an ER nurse. And at that time I was crying, hysterical. Is my son going to be okay? I mean, I dirt bike ride myself. And I know when you fall and you're up that high in the air, you're going to be hurt.
Oh, yeah.
And they said they didn't give me any information. But the nurse felt so bad for me. She said, write a note and I'll give it to your son. So I said, Jeremy, I'm here. I want to make sure you're okay. Please let me know, son. I love you. And luckily the nurse went in when my husband and my daughter was talking to the doctor, and he was conscious. And he said, I'm okay, Mom. I just can't talk to anyone.
Wow.
But I was relieved. So then I told Tony Ortega. He posted it the next day that they wouldn't, about the disconnection and not being able to see my son. And I think he helped me so that I could finally see my son in the hospital. But he was terrified, Ron. I just said, I'm so glad you're okay, honey. I'm going to leave. So that, that happened, and I can talk about it now. It's more detail in my book. And then there's a lot more about how I've tried to reconnect with my kids. I went to Texas with Inside Edition, a film crew, because they always track my flights when I go near Texas. And Inside Edition got me there. So I was able to have a 3-hour conversation with my son. He admitted about this the $3 million gag contract. He said, everybody signs that, Mom. I said, no, I think you're one of the first that has signed 3 million.
Yeah.
He was starting to wake up. And I told him, look at this website about them putting sexual libel on the internet about your mom. And he read it and his eyes were real big. We were making progress. And anyway, then he called his dad and it just went downhill from there. So the last time I went to try to see my kids was 4 years ago on Mother's Day. And my son ran from me. My daughter wouldn't answer the door. And I just got devastated. And then a couple years later, I was on 2020 with you.
Yeah.
That was my last big media thing I did. They aired my kid. They put my kids on television. Did you see that part, Ron, where my daughter and my son was on the same clip we were on?
I don't recall it because
I'll send it to you.
Yeah, I feel that they threw me under the bus, and I know that you didn't get your full story out. So I may have looked at it once or so, and I thought, the hell with it. And of course, I came to my own conclusion that the only way I was going to get any real story out or stories out was to start a podcast like this and interview people so they had a chance to tell their whole story, like you're doing today.
Thanks, Ron. Yeah, I didn't know my kids were going to be on. My friend Cindy Plahuta in Colorado called me up. She was an hour ahead of me, and she said, your kids are on television.
Wow.
I'm like, what? And I saw them, Ron, and I cried for weeks. I was broken down because they're being fed lies.
Yeah.
And my daughter thinks I have a vendetta more against Scientology than being her own mom. Why do you think I'm speaking out? They took my kids from me.
Yeah.
I have to. So my son said, Mom keeps going to the media with these lies. And I'm like, so I wrote a blog post. I have a blog. It's called A Mother's Heartbreak. And I said, Jeremy, if I'm lying, call me up. Let's talk about what I'm lying about. Because to my knowledge, I don't think I'm lying about anything. I think the church is lying a lot to my kids. And
well, they do nothing but lie. And look, there's 3 things you can be certain of in life, and I'll tell you what they are. This is going to educate everybody. You have to pay taxes. Everybody's going to die, and the Church of Scientology lies. Those are the 3 certainties, all right? And, maybe you think I'm trying to be humorous. I'm not, because everything that they say or do is in their own interest in preserving this particular group they have, this gang, which is no more a religion than it's a joke, all right? They got a tax exemption. They hide under that. They can get a lot of money tax-free, so they have hot and cold running attorneys, so they go out and intimidate people, or like this goon that came and threatened you with a beating. You know, this is their modus operandi, and it's terrible. But that's the reason I'm speaking out, and that's the reason Laurie is speaking out. And more people should do exactly the same thing. Look, don't live your life with your tail between your legs. Talk out against people like this. Go ahead, Laurie. Continue. Sorry to ramble like that for a minute, but you got my point.
Yes, I do. That's a good point. I agree with you 100%, Ron. I was broken down.
Your kid's saying that you're lying, right?
Yeah, I was broken down after seeing them on television, and I had to do an interview with Casey on Monday, which I did, but I cried through the whole thing. I went into a severe depression, Ron. I couldn't speak out anymore. I quit doing my book. I closed down for 1.5 years.
Wow.
Until just this last summer. I was starting to get my strength back, and I thought, I'm going to write the IJC. IJC is the International Justice Chief. My kids told me that's the only person you can talk to, Mom. So I thought, I'm going to write him. Called every day, wrote, emailed, didn't hear back. His name's Mike Ellis. Yeah, and I finally got through. And it was his secretary, and she said, he never talks on the phone. I said, well, how do I talk to him then? I mean, what's the best way? Write an official letter. I said, okay, and I'll email it. Didn't hear for a couple days, called her, got her again. She goes, we got your email. There was no information in it. And I said, there's no information. Yes, I put that I want to talk to him to work out a plan about my children. And I'm not sure if I lost you, Ron. I didn't see you there, but
no. So you'll only see me if I'm talking, Laurie.
Oh, okay, great. Sorry. Right, so that's why I was hesitant. So I wrote another letter saying, I'm Laurie Hodgson. I've been disconnected from my children for 7 years. All I want to do is be their mom. Can we work out an agreement? I want to do good roads, good weather, which is what I did with my father when I was 14. Right. I'm fine they do Scientology. I was baptized Lutheran. I went back to my Lutheran religion. I'm not a Scientologist. We don't need to talk about that. They wrote me a letter back. I have it. It's in my book. And they said, thank you for your letter. If you want to get back in good standing, you need to do the A to E steps.
Yeah.
And Ron, we know what those steps are. They're awful. They're in my book. But basically, I would have to say I've lied about everything I'm telling the truth about. I'd have to pay thousands of dollars for counseling that is like security checking. And they want to know all of my friends I talk to. I have to do thousands of hours of amends. And after I do all that, I may still not get my kids back. I can't do that. For the love of my children, I can't do these crazy A to E steps, right? So I wrote them back. And I just said, I can't do that, but I can do good roads, good weather. Never heard back from them. So I thought, I need to finish my book.
Yeah.
And I wrote my kids one more time, a postcard. I have their address. And I said, the IJC won't work with me. They won't even return my calls or my last letter. We're trying to work something out. So please call your mom so we can work out this disconnection and be a family. So they didn't. And I decided I'm going to finish my book.
Yep.
And I started speaking out again just this last December on Chris's show, Come Get Some. That was my first interview. And then I've done another one, and then the one with you. So I need to speak out, Ron. It doesn't help if you're quiet. I'm not going to be a mom 30 years down the line that did nothing. I can't do it. I need to do this for my kids, but not only me, for your family, for all the families out there. We all need to tell the truth.
Well, I agree with you 100%. And I can tell you, if you think you're going to gain anything by trying to talk sense to this Church of Scientology, which you're trying to do, I advise you to go in a telephone booth and pick up the phone, don't dial a number, and give that story to the dial phone. You're just going to get about as far with that as you would any goddamn reconciliation you're going to have with your kids by talking to the church. They've got to be exposed for what they are. They've got to be put in a frame so that they know that nobody is going to walk through those doors as long as people like you and myself and Mike Rinder and other people, well, of course, Leah, and keep talking out and get more people to do this. This is the only way this is going to be resolved, to expose them for what they are. They're a cult that's disguised as a religion, and they're operating as a business. And Laurie, I want to thank you for being on. Wait, have you made all your points? Because I don't want to cut you off. I want you to make sure you get your whole story. Are we okay on that, Laurie?
Yeah, I just want to say one thing. Jeremy and Jessica, if you're watching this video with Ron and I, read my book, turn the page, because I know if you do, you'll give me a call. Because I love you so much, and our family loves you. And I just hope you can read it. And I hope it helps everybody actually in this world. That's what I did the book for. I want to help other families. Thank you, Ron, for giving me this opportunity.
And I can't add a word to that, so we're going to end off right here. I'm Ron Miscavige. This is Life After Scientology. I'll see you on the next episode.